You're listening to the 49 Carats podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Monday, May 6th. My usual Monday co-host, Weston Smith, is in Aruba, having a better time than the rest of us, but I'm joined by another Smith today to talk new 49ers cornerback, Renardo Green. And my guest today is the host of Locked On Seminoles, among many other things, Mr. Brian Smith. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
Doing well. Glad to be here. Renardo is a heck of a player, and covering Florida State, he's a guy that came up a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, I did a show with Brandon Olson to discuss Ricky Pearsall after day one of the draft. I know he's part of the Locked On Network as well. And, you know, Florida connection. And, you know, he pumped me up about Ricky by the end of it. He also was realistic about some things that, you know, maybe Ricky could improve at the next level. So we'll probably get to some of that with Renardo as well. But Brian, in that show, we started off with an elevator pitch of Ricky Pearsall. So I'm going to ask you now if you could give us an elevator pitch of Renardo Green.
Well, I think he's a kid that, from where he's from, he's a Florida kid. The players in this state are a little different, to put it mildly. Fears nothing. And he fits, like you and I were discussing in our little message going back and forth for the show, the 49ers culture, like immediate. He's the rat in the room that will take on anything, even if it's bigger than him. He'll sack the quarterback. He'll hit guys behind the line of scrimmage. He always eats up all the information, can play multiple spots, got all kinds of stats about his position versatility. He's a guy the Niners can use as a weapon, even though he's a cover corner that plays bump and run. It's really unique because most guys just don't tackle that much at a corner. So I think Niner fans will like him as soon as he gets on the field for them this fall, because he fits their culture to a T.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. And you mentioned, you know, the fact that, you know, he's a Florida boy, and he's also played his entire career at Florida State, which is a bit of a rarity these days. But true. having being able to see him grow and develop as a player all those years at Florida State, like, what have you kind of noticed in those development years for him?
He went from a guy that was a pure cover corner that was, I want to say, like $165 out of high school. He played at Wekiva, just on the north edge of Orlando. He was only a 3-star recruit, but he had offers from a gazillion schools. He was a little underrated by the services, to a kid that's 186, 187 pounds. And now is a guy that hits like a strong safety, but still carries the corner skills that you're looking for in press man. And then they'll move him to nickel. They even played him in the box some this last year. And as like an edge guy, he's 186 pounds. That's, I mean, like, I'm not saying he's going to do that for the Niners, but that just puts the perspective of, hey, look, like these, like I'm looking at numbers and stats and everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't even do him justice, because he was the guy against LSU. They had 2 first-round picks at corner. He was the best guy on the field that night, not named Keon Coleman, the receiver that went so high. On the other side, he helped shut down key plays for LSU, and they blew them out. He was the number 1 cover corner. The defense coordinator, Fuller, said in a loaded secondary, FSU for the next few years will have guys drafted every single year out of the secondary. He was their best cover guy. That's as good a compliment as you get, because Fuller is obviously the one that orchestrates the whole deal. I just don't see why they wouldn't be able to use him in multiple roles right away, because he already proved that at Florida State. Again, he was just, I cover guys, probably wasn't the greatest tackler out of high school, completely developed his game in that regard, and they moved him everywhere and trusted him to do so. It was a multiple complex defense that he was a really key chess piece.
Yeah, you mentioned, you know, the versatility that he has. And I did notice that as well. Like, they use him on corner blitzes sometimes, you know, just mixing things up with him, the ability to, you know, handle nickel duties as well. That's something I think that is going to intrigue the 49ers right off the bat. I mean, obviously they have Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore. Both of those guys can handle the outside. This past season, Diamador Lenore moved inside on those nickel downs. But, you know, I think someone like Renardo Green maybe gives them the the flexibility to, if they want, move Lenore full-time back to the outside, have Renardo Green handle the slot, or vice versa. I mean, I think that option is going to be open to them this offseason. So I'm really excited about that and how he fits in with the current group of guys. I agree. I think he's going to be able to make a name for himself right off the bat. He's going to be able to compete right off the bat. You mentioned the LSU game. I definitely wanted to touch on that. Call it the Malik Neighbors game. But I mean, Brian Thomas as well was there, and he had to guard him some. He had one interception, one pass breakup, allowed 2 catches for 20 yards on 5 targets, no touchdowns allowed. I think that kind of felt like his coming out party in a way, right? For a lot of fans who maybe outside of FSU, kind of getting that notoriety outside of just, FSU, right? Would you say?
I think it is, and it fits the story. I cover recruiting for a living, and Florida kids are known to talk a lot. And if you challenge them, you better bring it. And like LSU fans are obnoxious, like a lot of major college fans. And they were all saying, we're going to just throw it all over you, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay, you guys, be careful what you say. And then they came out, especially in the second half, Florida State secondary, led by Renardo, just made mincemeat out of them. And the LSU receivers, I mean, they're really talented. I mean, like,
right.
Thomas ran like 4.33 at 210 pounds or whatever. He's a freakazoid, but they held them in check. And he's a guy, again, it's way smaller than some of these guys, and he's just so physically talented, and he's got good coverage skills. It's not just he's raw speed or whatever. He figured it out on every play, even though he's going against arguably the best overall receiving corps in college football. So I think that he's the ringleader, and he's the reason that Florida State made the run they did and going undefeated during the regular season. So I don't think Florida State even comes close to that without the great effort that he had against LSU, because it set the tone. Like they were just on fire after that, and he was the guy.
I think that's what gives me the most confidence in him, going into the NFL now, because I mean, LSU kind of known for having guys, wide receivers that have success at the next level, right? So you can say like he was going up against NFL receivers in that game. I mean, they're in the NFL now. They're gonna be successful in the NFL. And so there's no reason to believe that, Renardo won't be successful at the NFL level either, just seeing how he was able to perform against the likes of those LSU guys. We mentioned a bit about the fit with San Francisco and how he's going to fit right in. I definitely agree. I think part of that is what I kind of see is his mentality, right? I mean, John Lynch talked about, Green saying, you got a dog 15 times on the draft call. And, a lot of us fans saw that video as well. And he did say, you got a dog. And, I definitely believe that as well. So what can you tell us about Green's dog mentality and how that kind of unfolded at FSU?
Well, I mean, until this past season, I don't know if anybody knew just how physical he was. The LSU game, the Clemson game, which they probably shouldn't have won. He had 2 or 3 key plays in that game, including a play in the backfield where he stuck the running back for a 2-yard loss. He just developed into a confident player, not just in like Florida kids. There's never, even if they just got smoked on a play, they're confident on the next rep. It's a different deal. But the run game thing, like that shocked me as much as he developed. Kudos to the strength and conditioning program at Florida State and Green for taking that on. But I'd say by the end of his regular senior year, then this 5th year, he was a different player in the situation of blitzing, playing the run, and getting off blocks in the screen game. Like when you play the screen in college football and you screw it up, a lot of these guys, LSU ran a ton of them, would get big plays, etc. Against Clemson, he had to play for a loss again. He found a way to be really savvy. He was shrewd in how he would get through a block. Sometimes, like, you're 185 pounds. You're not going through the offensive lineman that kicked out. Okay, you got to find a way around. That's not going to end well. He'd figure it out, and he'd put a guy on his butt. So he was smart as much as he was a dog, is like he used to say. And that's taken to coaching. The guys that play those multiple roles, Adam Fuller's defense is not friendly for a freshman. Like, it's not. But at the same time, he kept learning and he kept getting better. And then he just gave him more and more responsibility. If you go to Pro Football Focus, which I know you did, Steph, like you look at all the spots that he played, and it's just almost weird because he's known as a true cover corner. You don't get those spots and those responsibilities without learning and going through it. And like I said, as a fifth-year senior, he's one of the most diverse defensive players in all of college football, and that's why he went in the second round.
Yeah, that's definitely impressive. And I know he wasn't necessarily, I guess, for a lot of people, draft analysts and such, going into the draft seen as like, a second round guy. But I think the 49ers do envision him being someone who's going to be able to be their top dog in this defense, in that secondary. And I mean, we mentioned Lenore, we mentioned Charvarius Ward, but those guys aren't signed beyond 2024. I think the 49ers will probably extend one of those guys at some point before their contract ends. But, I say Renardo Green is probably going to be their main outside guy after 2024, opposite either Lenore or Charvarius Ward. And with this defense, that person's going to handle a lot of responsibility. So everything you're telling me about Renardo Green, it sounds like he can handle it, right? And he has the right mentality to be able to take on that role pretty early on. Now, the fact that he is aggressive, he has a very aggressive style of play. I've seen that as well when I watched him, is great. Like, I love that about him. But it has its drawbacks sometimes too, because sometimes it could lead to some penalties. I know he had 11 penalties between 2022 and 23. So that's quite a bit. A few of those were, pass interference as well. So what can you tell us about that? If you can add any context to that, or if that's like concerning to you at all, how do you feel about those penalties?
Well, it's twofold. For those of you that follow both college and pro, the following won't be surprising. But I always laugh about this. The NFL drives me nuts because they want the scoring to be higher. You already know where I'm going with this. If I walked by you and you were a receiver and I'm a DB, they throw a flag at me. Like the NFL, it's brutal. In college, it's not polar opposite, but you can get away with a lot, especially like Florida State game, Florida State, Miami, Florida State, LSU. They're mugging each other. So I think that number is actually low for college, like the way they call it. Like it's ridiculous what they get away with in college. I do photography and stuff on the sideline. It's hilarious down in the red zone. Like in the NFL, there would be a flag on every play, literally. So he's going to have to adjust, but so do all the DBs. Right. And at the same time, again, his best asset is man-to-man bump. And like I told you when we were messaging back and forth, they've gotten rid of that in a lot of ways in the NFL because they just run bunch formations, and it's all the way down to like Little League now. So if you can't play zone and understand concepts, you're not playing. And against Florida State, because they got a gazillion good DBs, everybody tried all kinds of things. Like I mentioned a minute ago, Clemson ran bunch and they'd run screens and stuff. He'd sift his way through and not only made a tackle, he made a tackle in the red zone that changed the game, another play, and Clemson runs screens as well as any team in the country. And he dropped a guy on his butt for like a 2-yard loss. So he understands playing off and all that too. So he'll get some handsy calls, especially early in his career, I'd imagine. But everybody has to adjust the NFL level. Yeah. So I don't think that's going to go away completely. The Florida kids, like he's going to try to beat somebody up at the line of scrimmage to a certain degree. I still think he needs to add a little more weight because most of their good receivers in the NFL are $195, 200 at minimum. So he's always, he's been used to being the smaller guy. Again, he was 165 pounds out of high school. It's not very big, but he's added 20. He has a little more weight and just, continues to hone his craft. He'll be okay, but do not discount him in bunch formations, playing zone, playing press bail, etc. He can do all those things. It's just at the NFL level, you really do get 5 yards. They do not care. They're going to throw it. Right. That's up to him. Because they want to see the scoreboard light up. That's what draws fans in. Fair or not, that's just fact.
Yeah, so like you said, it is going to be an adjustment. So while I do worry about that early on, I mean, I guess like the thing that's important too is to not lose any confidence. If you get flagged, okay, it's fine. It's fine. Just, play the next rep and you're good. Then you don't want players to get in their head. That's something that I've seen happen with corners in the NFL is when they make that leap to the NFL, their confidence, goes down for whatever reason. They get beat, a couple of times. And so I guess that would be my concern. But again, just based on everything else you've told me about Renardo Green, I'm not worried about, that being a factor with him. So I think that's good. Now, the other thing that I think you can look at his stats and maybe, scratch your head a little bit is the fact that he only had one interception in his, collegiate career, which, you talk about how aggressive he is. And yeah, you see it on tape and he could dislodge balls like last minute, get his hands in there, so he makes a play on the ball. But like, again, adding context to that one interception, if you can, what was kind of lacking in that department and why, he wasn't getting as many interceptions?
It's easier to get picks in zone, which Florida State, because they had so much talent, they didn't have to. They tried to suffocate teams because like they had Jared Verse up front. You know what I mean? Like guys like that, Patrick Payton, who's a guy, the Niners and everybody will probably look at after this next year. Their pass rush with those guys plus Fisk, etc. They just tried to basically 7 or 8 man you to death. There's only a couple of guys on your schedule each year at the college level that can really throw it. And they didn't worry about that. If the safety got it, great. But they just said, eat them up. Everything within the first 10 yards is you. That's more or less their defense. Can't do that at the pro level. I get that.
Right.
You'll probably be more successful in that regard at the NFL level because you can't play near as much man, in my opinion. The schemes are too hard and there's too much bunch formation, etc. But I don't know if he's got the greatest hands either. Maybe that's the reason he did it that way. There were a few plays I'm like, man, you should have went for the pick there, and he would just swat at the ball.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I kind of wondered too, but at the same time, he was the guy head in the center of that guy's stomach at the beginning of the play, didn't pay attention to the quarterback and just trailed and used his hands. I would prefer that he went it for more. Maybe the Niners will teach it differently. Every coach is different, but he's certainly in position to make more. I was a little surprised by that too. You would have thought he would have had 3 or 4 just this last year. Because again, he was their best cover guy in a secondary that'll have probably 5 or 6 guys out of it from last year's group in some capacity drafted over a 2-year span. So I don't know the whole story, but again, he tried to knock him away probably a little more than I would have liked.
Yeah, 13 pass breakups in 2023. So yeah, that led the conference. So definitely something he did at a really, really high level. But again, yeah, maybe you'd want to see him go for the ball a little bit more. I'm sure like the 49ers think, hey, we can coach him up to do that. Clearly, the one interception isn't something that bothered them at all. So they probably also think that at the next level, that's something he's going to be able to change going forward. As far as oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
I just want to bring up something you mentioned. The 49ers thought he was a second-round pick. Every team has a different evaluation. He's a second-round pick for the Niners. There's 32 teams. Certain teams, Green would not be a good fit. So that's why when you see these draft boards, well, he's a second-round pick. I know everybody makes money off doing pre- and post-draft stuff. I get it. Heck, we're doing it now in some capacity. But like the projection stuff, it's all about everything's just to say it's not. The 49ers grade a guy. It could be Jared Verse. It could be Renardo, whatever, is different. And especially with the way they play. At a team that likes to play a ton of zone, Renardo may not have been on the board for some teams. So as a Niner fan, know that like he fits what you're doing to a T. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, no, and that's really great context because, a lot of fans and, sometimes I do it myself. We get wrapped up in the mock drafts and, and all those things. So that's where our perception of what too early or too late, a player being a steal comes from, right? But that perception isn't reality. I mean, we don't know where these teams are grading these guys. So yeah, I mean, obviously the 49ers felt good about taking him in the second round. And why? Because he is a great fit for what they do. And, there's really no one who knows, better who's the good fit for the 49ers than the 49ers themselves, right? So we speculate and all these things. But yeah, that's why I feel good about this pick. I see the vision. And yeah, definitely to me, it is a good fit all around. Now, as far as character and work ethic goes, what do you think the 49ers are getting with Renardo Green?
Well, you got to look at this from the big box picture first. When he got to Florida State, it was 2019, and they were going through a transition of not being very good. And I'm being ultra kind here. A lot of guys would have left, even though he played, but like he could have went to other places and he could have done other things. Like, in the NFL, they have tampering, blah, blah, blah. If you contact a guy out in college, look, there's more cheating than you can possibly imagine. And he stuck around when they stunk. That's first thing. He wanted to represent with his guys. So I think that needs to be mentioned because as you brought up early in the podcast, Steph, how many guys were at one school now that you're scouting, either would they go to the Niners or not? The number is dwindling. So that's first. Second, he hung on to it because a lot of people was down on Florida State's defense even. And then in 22, they started being good when he kind of started to come full circle and he was really good. And then this last year, he was a straight up dude. As you mentioned, led the league in pass breakups. He was their guy against Clemson, against LSU, against Miami. That's when I kind of knew. So he was given the task that a lot of guys probably would have frowned upon because, like, you can get smoked when you're outside and you're going against Brian Thomas and guys like that. You can get YouTubed right now, and that does not go away. As the old saying in the NFL, the eye in the sky does not lie. I say that to kids all the time in high school. I'm like, you screw this rep up, I got it. Like they'll freak sometimes, but like they'll be talking smack. Hey, we're grading you too. And the NFL scouts were. He shined the best against the best teams. So I like that about him. So his character has to be good in that regard, or else Fuller wouldn't have trusted in him. His teammates wouldn't have, and he wouldn't have stuck around for 5 years. I think that's about as good a way I can put it as possible.
Yeah. And again, I think that speaks to the confidence that he has as well to be able to say, hey, like I could be part of the culture change here, part of, turning this thing around. And it sounds like he was very much part of that. So very much encouraging to hear. Now the 49ers ended up drafting 2 FSU guys, right? The other guy in the 7th round, linebacker Tatum Bethune. What is one thing, if fans should know anything about Tatum Bethune, what would it be?
He's a kid from inner city Miami, and he had to scratch and claw to survive. First off, he goes to UCF, under-recruited because he was undersized, transferred to Florida State, like he was the guy at UCF, walks into Florida State, and a lot of people are like, he ain't, this big time, he ain't gonna. And he was the other guy that was kind of like the, well, now look what we got. Because right off the bat in 22, 23, he was really, really good. He will absolutely hammer people. Even like in the press box or whatever, you're like, if you played certain hits, you're like, that's a moment you're not going to like as the other guy when you see it on film. No fear. None. Now, he's undersized. That's not in question. He's 5'11", 215, 220, I'm guessing. I don't know what he got. Like at the combine, they drop weight to run and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But he can be a special teams guy in the NFL and be a situational player, which I'm guessing 70% of the reps on defense are in nickel or dime in the NFL now anyway, because most teams run 3 wide or they have a tight end in the slot. Like it's so complex. He might have a role somewhere. I'm not going to call it, hey, he's the guy that, barely made it into the league. He's going to be a 10-year guy. I'm not stupid, but he'll play somewhere in the NFL, whether it's the Niners or not. He'll run through a wall. He's the guy when the coach says, hit that over there, he'll ask how many times. Again, that's a culture kind of deal. Yep. And like if he was 6'2.5", he'd have went in the 3rd round. Measurables are everything in the NFL, and he does not fit them. He doesn't. Right. You can't teach the heart, where he's been from, what he's been through, and now kind of like, hey, this kid gets it. He was a thumper against, again, kind of like Renardo, the teams you need him to be. He was a big-time player. So my only concern is, can he take the physical pounding? And that's why measurables matter. I have no idea. Right. But he's not going to leave the 49ers organization with them saying, man, he's soft. You know what I mean? Like for this level, that's not going to happen. He will lay the wood.
I love it. And James in the comments says, bring the boom Bethune. I mean, The fact that you say he had a scratch and claw for everything he got, I mean, now he's in the NFL, 7th round pick, very deep roster that he just joined.
That's right.
He's gonna
It's
have
hard.
to scratch and claw again, so it's good to know that he's already done it. And usually for guys that have already done it, they feel like they can do it again. And it feels like that might be the case for Bethune. And the 49ers have had a lot of linebackers that they drafted late, even undrafted guys they've brought in, and they've been able to make them like serviceable guys on their team or just, elsewhere in the NFL. So yeah, I definitely think Bethune could potentially be that for them.
Every now and then you got to find ways to make your salary cap work too. Linebacker's the hardest spot in the NFL anyway, because you're exposed all the time in the passing game. So you're not going to spend as much. The Niners have found a way to manipulate that a little bit, and they got great coaching. But this is another example of it, as you mentioned, Steph. If you don't find a way to do it, you're not going to make salary cap numbers. You got to win with some guys that are 5th, 6th, 7th, and undrafted guys on your roster. Bethune fits that through a T.
And that's why it's so important too to be able to identify players who fit your system, and if maybe not fit your system, but just also fit your culture and what you stand for, what kind of, identity you want these guys to have. And, it definitely feels like these FSU guys, clearly the 49ers took a liking to both Renardo Green and Tatum Bethune. So they're doing something right out there in Florida, because they got Ricky Pearsall as well. So definitely pumped about both of those guys. But Brian, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. There's been some incredible insight on both of these guys. Really excited for Renardo Green. Hope you tune in to the season to see how these guys do.
I will. I'm looking forward to it, because the Niners are one of the few teams that kind of play like a college team with more grit, more physicality, old school football. And I think that's why those guys, as you said, will fit in. It should be pretty seamless.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, for everyone that tuned in, thank you guys so much. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. Appreciate it. But for now, guys, have a good rest of your Monday, folks. Peace.